Welcome everyone to this last BizSmart Lunch and Learn webinar of the year. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Nigel Dunand from Sandler Training. Please take the opportunity during the webinar to post any questions using the function on your panel, and Nigel will answer them as and when he gets them. You are all muted, so please send your messages via the information panel as discussed. The webinar should last about 20 minutes, so I hope you all enjoy it. Over to you, Nigel.
Great. Thanks very much, Caroline. Now, there may be a click here. What I'm going to do is switch to my headphones and microphone. Great. Here we go. Yes, thanks very much, Caroline, for setting up this webinar. Topic of the day is the pre-call plan, adding predictability to your sales process. Now, I've got to confess, I pretty much never have anyone ask me a question such as, hey, Nigel, how do I add predictability to my sales process? I also pretty much never have anyone ask me, can you give me the structure for a pre-call plan? But I do find myself getting involved with lots of different people with different challenges, and the question might start out something like, hey, Nigel, I've got this meeting coming up next week. Let me tell you about it, and can you give me a few pointers as to what I should do? I get those questions a lot, and having fielded lots of those questions, I recognize there's a sort of pattern and a structure that we can use when preparing for meetings that I'd like to share with you. And I'll just back up a little bit. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I do recognize some of the names on the list here, actually. My name's Nigel Dunand. I run the Birmingham Training Center of Sandler Training. We are a sales training, management training, leadership training, and coaching organization. I work a lot with entrepreneurs, professional service type people. People are very good at what they do. They've got a lot of great skills, a lot of great expertise. So I was just distracted there. Caroline's given me the thumbs up. We are actually recording, and I am on. All right. So that's great. Yes, so a lot of my clients don't necessarily really see themselves in a sales role. They'll tell me things like, actually, I don't really sell, Nigel. I get most of my business from referrals. A starting point here is, I think a lot of us have a sales process, but we maybe don't call it a sales process. There's stuff that we do that brings us business, and we maybe haven't necessarily all taken the time to break those activities down into their component parts. And just like a production line for a motor vehicle, I'm an engineer by background, so I use the production line, the Henry Ford assembly production line as an analogy for a lot of the stuff that I do. Since Henry Ford invented the production line, no one knows how to build a car from start to finish. But every single part of the process, if it's broken down into discrete parts, it means that you can get a lot of people all contributing to the output. If you're aware of what these discrete parts are that make us successful, then we can focus in on doing more of them and fine-tuning them for effectiveness. So to get started, if I flick through to the next screen, if my assistant, thank you very much, can flicker through. So we're going to be looking here at some of the key elements required to build a repeatable process like a production line and avoid the trap that we can end up in the buyer-seller dance, where people might tell us, gosh, that's a wonderful meeting, really enjoyed it, thanks very much, let's catch up again some other time. And it just fizzles away into nothing. Other times they might say, wow, that sounds really great, can you send us a proposal? And then we do a lot of work sending a proposal and never to hear from them again. So I'm going to outline with you, if we flick over to the next couple of slides here, an outline for what we call the pre-call plan. And I'm going to go through these 4 things step by step. So the first part of building a pre-call plan is to figure out what exactly is your objective. What's your objective for the meeting? What's your objective for the phone call? What's your objective for that referral meeting that you're having? What's that objective for that networking meeting that you're doing? What's your objective? A lot of the times, if we're not completely clear as to what we want as an outcome, that in itself is the reason for us wasting a lot of time. There's the old story about Alice in Wonderland, and Alice walking through Wonderland with the cat. They get to a fork in the road. Alice says, which fork shall we take? And the cat says, well, where are we going? And Alice says, I don't know. And the cat says, well, in that case, it pretty much doesn't matter which fork we take. So that's the 30,000-foot view of what an objective is. Let me give you an example of my 10,000-foot view of an objective that I usually have for a meeting with a first-time meeting with someone who is a prospect. They might not even be a prospect. They could just be a suspect. So my objective is at that meeting to establish whether or not there's an opportunity for a mutually profitable relationship. And if not, to part as friends. So I'll just repeat that. And again, this works for me and it might not work for you. So my objective is to establish whether or not there's an opportunity for a mutually profitable relationship. If not, I'm going to part as friends. The reason why I added that second bit in there to my objective is especially in the early days when I set up my business, I found I was having a lot of meetings with people, figuring out that they weren't really a prospect for me, and then accidentally sort of blowing them up. So they never really wanted to speak with me again, ever. So I realized, obviously, that's not a good strategy. Conversely, I think there are a lot of people out there whose main purpose is to make sure they make friends. And so they might be more concerned with making friends than they are about establishing the first part of the objective there, which is to figure out, is there a mutually profitable relationship to be had? Second part of this is the upfront contract. So bearing in mind what are the objectives, what's my actual upfront contract? Now, for those of you that have been along, those of you that are clients of mine, or those of you that have come along to our monthly sales masterclass, you may have an idea of what we mean by an upfront contract. An upfront contract is where we agree at the beginning of the meeting to what's going to happen at the end. And I'll share with you this. When I ask, going back to the objective thing, when I ask salespeople or sales managers, often in a large room, what their objective is for a meeting, they might tell me something like, well, it's just to introduce myself, or to show them the new product that we've got, or to sell them this, to make a sale. And I think those are really lousy objectives. I walk into this room now, I've got Caroline sitting next to me. So, hi, Caroline. Nice to meet you.
Hello.
For those of you that can't see on the video, we just shook hands. Well, if my objective was to introduce myself, I've already done it. Now I can leave. So that's a lousy objective. Likewise, selling them something, especially if what you're selling is a long-term professional relationship or a product or service that might cost tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. Caroline selling her PA services. What she's really doing there is selling a relationship that's going to last a long time. I think it's often unrealistic to be able to sell someone in one meeting. So we have a trouble. So that's a problem right away with the objective. So the point of the upfront contract is understanding what our objectives are. How are we going to word that in terms of the meeting with the client or the prospect? So I'll give you an example of what an upfront contract might sound like. Caroline, thank you for inviting me in. I think we spoke on the phone. You mentioned you had a problem with blah, blah, blah. And that was important enough reason for us to meet. You are still okay with the hour or so that we set a time? Yes, good. Now, it may be, Caroline, that for whatever reason, during the course of this meeting, after you've asked me a whole bunch of questions and after I've asked you some questions, you figure out we're not a good fit. If that's the case, you're going to be okay. You're going to feel like we've wasted our time. Oh, no, 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 no. Okay, thank you very much. On the other hand, we might figure out that we are a fit and there is some sort of mutually profitable relationship to be had. In which case, in my experience, we'll either arrange to put another date in our diary where we can continue the conversation, or we might even arrange at this meeting a place to get started and figure out some form of mutual investment in time or money that takes us to that next step. Would you be okay making that sort of decision? So that's my very poorly worded upfront contract there. But you get a sense there of the elements. And I'll just go through that one by one with you now. So one element of the upfront contract is the purpose. What's the purpose of the meeting? It could just be we spoke on the phone. It could be we met at a networking meeting or we met at a trade show and we decided that it would be worthwhile spending some time together. So what's the purpose? I think it's important in your upfront contract to specifically verbalize that. Time, that's the second element of the upfront contract. How long do we have? Now, if we agree to an hour, I want to remind them that we agreed to an hour on the phone. I'm sure a lot of us have been in situations where the meeting's been interrupted or they've suddenly said, oops, sorry, I've got to run now, and we were surprised by that. I really don't want that to happen in a meeting. So let's agree on the time. I also want to give them permission to ask questions and for me to give permission to ask questions. How else are we going to find out whether we're whether there's an opportunity for a mutually profitable arrangement? So explicitly, I'm going to ask if it's okay to ask and answer questions. And then finally, the outcome. I always like to let people know that no is okay. It sort of takes the pressure off the meeting. So let's give each other permission to say no. We can end up saving a lot of time if we get the early no. If it's a yes, and we think there is enough reason to go to the next step, let's define what yes means. And let's define it early on at the beginning of the meeting in that upfront contract. So here's a question you might like to ask yourself. What's your minimal acceptable outcome for the next meeting that you're going to? And what's a home run? Or if you're a cricketer rather than a baseball player, what's a six? So a six for me, or a home run for me, is at that first meeting we can find enough of a reason to get started and the prospective client might give me a few £100s. A minimal acceptable outcome for me is that, well, we can't make that decision to spend money at the first meeting. It requires a second meeting, and at that second meeting we will make a decision to spend some money. Now, I don't know, we've got an assortment of people on the phone, and those particular objectives might not be applicable to you, but what are your minimal acceptable objectives, and what's a home run for you at that meeting? Now, having figured out what that is and what ideally you'd like your upfront contract to be, I suggest you write this out. It should fit on only one side of A4. But if you can write out word perfect your upfront contract, now I'm not suggesting it actually comes out of your mouth like that, but the chances are when you're in front of a prospect, it's more likely to come out. So right up front at the beginning of the meeting, we can mutually agree to an acceptable outcome from the meeting. And again, this will be done conversationally. It won't be a checklist. It won't be a monologue. it'll be a conversation. So just one more time. Caroline, thanks very much for inviting me in. I think the purpose of the meeting was you mentioned you had some problems over the phone, various sales challenges, sales cycles taking a long time, that sort of thing. And those challenges were important enough for you that we spend some time talking about them. Is that right, or has anything changed? Great, appreciate that. And when we spoke on the phone, we agreed to spending about an hour together. Are you still okay for an hour, or is something else going on? Great. Now, I know you've got a lot of questions for me, and I'll also have a lot of questions for you. As we go through that, I may find out that we're just not a good fit. I like to think that we can help everyone with these types of problems. In reality, I know that's just not the case. If sometime during the course of this meeting I figure out that I just can't help you, are you going to be okay if I tell you that? Great, I appreciate that. Likewise, if you're looking at me across the table here thinking, I can't imagine working with this person, you're going to be okay telling me that. Now, you'll probably want to couch it in slightly different words, so I don't take it quite so personally, but are you going to be okay if you just can't imagine working with me? Or you figure out that these sales challenges aren't that important to you? Great. And so if it looks like we can work together, we're going to have to spend a few minutes perhaps talking about what the next steps are. Typically, that might involve an upfront investment, as I mentioned on the phone, a few £100, maybe even a few £1,000. Or we might figure out we can't spend any money at this meeting at all. The only thing we can do is put another date in the diary, and at that meeting, make a decision as to whether or not we're going to invest some more time and money. Are you okay, Caroline, making that sort of decision by the end of this meeting? Great, appreciate it. Caroline's nodding. I held up a sign, nod. So that's my version of the upfront contract. Yours will sound nothing like that, but what is your version with those elements? So imagine now you go to a meeting, and every single meeting you go to, you know that you're going to have, the only outcomes you have are acceptable outcomes. For me, a no is acceptable. I'd rather get the no earlier. A yes is acceptable as well, only if it's a clearly defined yes. So if we go to every single meeting knowing we're going to have one of those outcomes, we should start off the meeting a whole heck of a lot more relaxed, as the other person is as well. We have explicitly given them permission to say no, thus taking away all the pressure off them. And I think that's why often people, if they're meeting someone in a sales role, and it might be an accountant, a lawyer, an insurance person, or someone selling business services, PA services, sometimes we don't think we're putting pressure on the other person, but in their mind there is. So by explicitly mentioning that it's okay to say no, we can often get them comfortable with this. Next step in the process is questions. So in my pre-call plan, I'm going to write down a list of questions that I think are applicable to their meeting. There's a little one-liner here I'd like to share, and that is, we demonstrate our expertise through the questions we ask, not the statements we make. Big challenge I think we can have is that we're so keen to let everyone know how wonderful our services are. We struggle sometimes to ask the right questions so the prospect can uncover the reasons why they might want to do business with us. So having a list of questions that we know work from previous experience, or just trying out different questions if we haven't used this pre-call plan format before, can not only build repeatability into the process, but it can increase our effectiveness. So for example, a good question, if we provide accountancy services and we're meeting with someone who we know has already got an accountant, one good question might be to ask them, in a straight fashion as possible. Hey, I'm sort of surprised that you're meeting with me. I already know you've got an accountant. What are they not doing that you'd hope they would do, or what are they doing that you wish they wouldn't? that sort of question can get them thinking and will help you figure out what it is that they're coming to you for. And then finally, the mindset. What's our mindset for our meeting? I know myself, if I've had a great week and a great morning, I'll turn up to a meeting with a very positive mindset. If I've had a lousy week and my wife yelled at me before I got in the car, then I can turn up to a meeting a little bit discombobulated, if that's a word. And so what can I do to make sure I've got the right mindset? There are some things that I always like to have as a reminder before I go into any meeting. And I'll just share with you some of these. I like to have an abundance mindset. I like to remind myself there are plenty of people out there for whom I am the exact right solution. And that abundance mentality, I find, can relax me. Another one is I'm independently wealthy and I don't need the money. If I approach every meeting like that, the other person feels a lot less pressure and I feel far less desperate. Now, I've got to admit, when I first started off writing down these different mindsets, a part of me was fighting against it because it wasn't really the truth. But after having written that down enough times, I just believe it. Another one is for me, this won't work for you, I am a cure for sales cancer. I give my clients a 10 times or more return on investment if they choose to do business with it. And again, that when I first started writing that down 8 years ago when I set up my business, I probably didn't quite believe it. Now, however, that is reinforced with my clients. And when I turn up to a meeting, I just have to have that mindset. I don't have to tell my prospects that. I just have to have that as a mindset. And then finally, the other mindset I like to have is I'm great at helping people make the right decision. And that right decision might be to not do business with me. Now, I don't know for you what are the mindsets you need for going into any particular meeting, but you might want to give that some thought. What's the mindset you need? So there's my 4 main elements of the pre-call plan. The objective, upfront contract, questions, and mindset. If anyone has, I'm conscious of time, if anyone's got a few questions and they want to type them now, will I see them pop up? So let's just see if they'll pop up. Well, I got a question here. Why give people permission to say no? I like that one. So, yes, why give people permission to say no? That's a great question because people already, they know they can say no. What we found is if you give people explicit permission to say no, it can really relax them in that meeting. A lot of people have a fear that, oh my gosh, I'm going to be sold. If you give them permission to say no, it helps them right away realize that, hey, they can just walk out of this thing and you can part as friends. So that's a great question. Anything else? I've got a question here on how do I get an abundance mindset? How do I get an abundance mindset? I like that. I think, and I've attached this to the presentation. We don't have enough time to go through it, but I think it's essential that to create an abundance mindset, one way to do it is just to pretend and to fake it until we really do have far more prospects than we actually need. But another way is to, and I'll send this out afterwards, is to have a prospecting process that is appropriate for our sales process. No point in having an effective sales process if we don't also have an effective prospecting process that feeds us more than enough prospects into the top of our sales pipeline. So I've got about 20 questions here. I won't spend time on them now, but this is one way to make sure that we create a prospecting process that gives us an abundance mentality. I'll send that out afterwards. Okay, so I'm looking at time. I think that's just about it. If there's no more pressing questions, I'd like to thank you very much for that. If any of you want to know more about building a repeatable sales process, if you contact Caroline, she'll be more than happy to share with you an invitation, come as her guest to one of our Break the Rules and Close More Deals sessions that I have once a month at our training center in Longbridge. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much, Nigel. That was very informative. You make it sound so easy. As Nigel said, I will send out a copy of his presentation to everybody, and on there it will have his full contact details. Thank you for taking part in today's Lunch and Learn webinar. I'd like to just end the session today by wishing you all a very Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.